Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And I haven't been streaming much this year, and something really weird has seemed to have happened in the World of Tanks meta. And that is now, the 60 TP is the second most played tier 10 heavy tank in the last 30 days on the European server, and it actually has the best win ratio difference, at least according to Tanks GG, of any of the tier 10 heavies. So I'm kind of like scratching my head here thinking, what has happened while I've been away and I haven't been so actively playing the game? Although, when I think about it, it looks like just the rest of the player base is finally catching up to something that I've been saying for years, and the 60 TP is an absolute banger of a vehicle, and it totally deserves the attention in the meta that it has been receiving. This was the first ever tier 10 tank that I did 10,000 damage in, something that then I beat it with the 279E, and then I managed to beat it with the Kampfpanzer as well, the reward German heavy tank. But this tank will always hold a special place in my heart because of that fact that it was the first tank that I ever did 10,000 damage in. Unfortunately, I start off this game in a bit of an ugly way there, managing to try and get a greedy switch out to HE for the Borsig that I thought I was going to rush, but then I get caught by a T30 and a Tiger II in the side. So why is this tank so awesome? Well, it has to be that it's just like an E100, but better. It doesn't have flat cheeks like an E100, it's way faster than an E100, and unlike the E100, which has a 150mm caliber gun, this one's 152. And while they hit the same with regards to their alpha damage, when you have those extra 2mm, it means that you can overmatch all 50mm plates. And there are quite a lot of them. For example, there's one sticking right on top of the 60 TP. You can actually overmatch this entire plate with a 151 larger millimeter caliber gun, whereas the E100 will ricochet off that with armor piercing. You can also do the same to the Super Conqueror without having to fire gold necessarily, unless you want to hit the rounded weak point on top. I'm talking about overmatching just that plate like you saw on the 60 TP. And there are so many plates in the game that are 50mm, whereas lower caliber guns would just ricochet off, whereas this one just manages to go right through. And it means that you don't really need to spam gold in this vehicle, at least all the time, to be able to make it work, especially when you get into a nice matchup like this. The heat rounds on this vehicle are a little bit underwhelming at 317 compared to the E100s, I believe, which are 334 in that kind of region. So I'd definitely rather have the E100 for just bludgeoning my way through super thick, heavy armor within that regard. But let's talk about this vehicle's speed. Its base speed is 35 kilometers an hour. Then when you take one of the field mods, it becomes 39 kilometers an hour. And then you could take a turbo like you see me using, and then you could either have 44 or 45 kilometers an hour top speed, depending if you're going to use a Bond turbo on this tank. So this vehicle is just this wonderful, flexible vehicle that hits so darn hard. It absolutely smashes for 750 alpha. It has 8 degrees of gun depression. It has armor that isn't perfect, but it is forgiving and can manage to bounce rounds that some other vehicles would have to suffer for, like that T-30's gold round there managed to just bounce off that hull armor. And while its turret does have a weak point on top, as you can see the hatch up here on the top right when you're facing the vehicle, it's not the easiest of things to hit. So I'm going to try and overmatch the top of the Tiger II turret there, and there you go. That was an armor-piercing round right into that Tier 8 German heavy. It makes me feel sad, managing to take so many hit points off what was my first Tier 8 as well. Oh, man. But yeah, this vehicle, it's basically everything that I fell in love with the E100 when I first played it, but just so much better. Not better RNG there, as the Ridgeline yoinks the first heat round that I fire in this game. I thought this game's meant to be pay to win. If I load the gold, my shell should definitely hit the target, right? Well, no, not in that case. But we're doing fairly good here, up to 5,000 damage. Hopefully we can finish off the Tiger II, picking up our second kill of the game. But even though we've done 5,000 damage, this game is still close. We're down by about a couple thousand hit points. We're up by a couple thousand hit points on the enemy team. But I'm just hoping that this Ferdinand is going to expose himself. I'm still worried because I seem to be surrounded completely and utterly. But anyway, look, I digress. Let's focus back on the 60 TP and why this thing is just so darn epic. So, in addition to this, the accuracy at 0.38, it's not bad for such a large caliber gun. And I think really the fact that this thing has a big old amount of hit points as well, 2,600, it's actually one of the few heavies that I don't use a durability device on, because more often than not I am going hull down in this vehicle, and because the reload is so long with the alpha, I don't feel that if I get tracked, it's the end of the world, because my reload is most likely going to be significantly longer than the enemy team. And so if I have such tremendous alpha damage, then I can afford to sit there, maybe for a little bit, maybe tank a shell, tank 2 shells, because I need to reload anyway. Whereas if I'm in a high DPM faster, what should I say, a faster firing heavy, I kind of need to make sure that my opponents aren't locking me down, because I need to be constantly shooting them every 6 seconds. Whereas this vehicle with a gun rammer and vents, to be able to maximize the firepower potential, its reload is probably going down towards like the 15 mark on this tank, which is still really scary. So it's this combination: hull down, reasonable speed, massive alpha, and very flexible ammunition. This tank, back before the HE nerfs, was one of the best ways to play the game for free. I managed to get gold in ranked on my free-to-play account without actually firing, I think it was more than about 5 gold rounds over like 100 games. And I managed to get the best rewards that you could get from ranked on the free-to-play, purely because you could manage to fire HE. Now, I still think that the vehicle would be worse with old school HE than it would be with just spamming heat. If you're spamming heat, you'd hit for 750 more often than you would hit for kind of like that 300, 350 that you get away with, well, you used to be able to get away with the HE. But just to be able to sit there and be so consistently dealing 300 damage, whereas other tanks would ricochet off you, and they couldn't really do much unless they hit the weak point with either the gold rounds or the regular rounds that they were firing, just meant that you were so consistent. Wargaming noticed this, and they basically just trashed HE because I guess they wanted to just make sure the free-to-play players were doing even worse than they already needed to be, so to say. And so the 60 TP, they definitely got blasted with the HE changes, but I still soldiered on with the vehicle. And just by switching now to learning some of the more overmatch mechanics to make those AP shells work, or just say sod it and compensate, and then actually pay Wargaming the gold rounds that they want you to fire, when of course you need them. And it just can still absolutely club. Just not quite as flexible with the way that the HE shells used to be. And looking at my ammo loadout, I probably should reduce a few of the HE shells that I'm using. But this thing carries enough ammunition to destroy pretty much the entirety of the enemy team. The 10 standard rounds that I took on this tank, that's 7,500. The 10 gold rounds that I took on this tank, that's 7,500. And when are you needing to do more than about 15,000 damage? Now, of course, you've got to take into account that you will ricochet, or you'll finish off low health tanks like you saw me do in those last couple. So you're not going to be doing 750 every shot, because 3 out of the last 4 shots were finishing off tanks to pick up 5 kills. We were doing about 300 damage for each of those shells. So then you're probably not having enough to be able to mix in with the rest of the high damage shells that you'll get against the full health tanks. So I just decided to tank that Ferdinand because earlier on in the game he was firing at that with the 105mm. And while it does now mean that I'm a 2-shot for the G-Saw, I think it's far better to remain calm and to make sure you don't whiff the shell, because then that'd be pretty embarrassing if what looks like a stock Ferdinand was able to finish me off in this game. We're up to 7,800 damage and a top gun, just showing you why this vehicle is so meta right now. I can't believe I'm saying that. The 60 TP is a meta tank and arguably the best tech tree heavy tank. Of course, it'll come down to a lot of the players checking it out, but I've always thought that it was one of, if not the best heavies. Always one of the vehicles that I gave a firm recommendation to, and the vehicle that has been pulling off big results for me, even though I wouldn't claim to be the best of players, right? I think this vehicle is very friendly for all kinds of players, and I think that's why it's doing so well with the win rate difference. The high alpha damage is very forgiving, so even if you're a casual player, because you've got such good alpha damage and such a nice variety of ammunition, or sometimes you're going to be overmatching shells that otherwise you wouldn't with the lower caliber guns, you don't have to hit many shots. Combine that with the huge amount of hit points, reasonable mobility, and this thing, it's just the all-round performer. So I was wondering, can I barge past this TS5, but I thought I'd shunt him out the way. That's not how I want to play, especially considering that me and the TS5 have been working so well together, and that's crazy. Playing their TS5 gave me a thumbs up and said thank you earlier. So now it's just a formality, really. Can we manage to find the G-Saw? So I'm going to speed the replay up a little bit, but excuse me. One thing that you've got to worry about with a G-Saw here is they can manage to finish us off in 2 seconds. because of that awesome intraclip reload that they have. So the TS5 on my team says cap. I press affirmative, and I've played Mountain Pass enough to know where the G-Saw is likely to be hiding. Sometimes the G-Saw might be up here, but now that they've nerfed this position, it's harder for them to be able to use even your amazing gun depression to be able to deal with opponents that are flanking up there. So I know that that G-Saw is most likely going to be sneaking at the back of the map. So I'm going to go the extra mile here, and I'm actually going to tell my team F7 if spotted typed badly. So F7 would actually call for help. So now, I mean, you don't really need a call for help to know that the TS5 has taken a hit from the G-Saw there. There's no other player on the map. Looks like they fired 2 shots. They've only got 2 more. I'm pinging the map as to where the G-Saw is and hoping that we're maybe going to be able to get a cheeky Radley Walters medal. But the absolute scumbag called Bad Law on the enemy team looks like they fire off their mag and then they drown themselves at the end of the battle, denying me a Radley and the possibility to get to about 8,500 damage. Still, absolute banger of a game, destroying half of the enemy team in a really nice matchup. Now, something weird happened, and that was that the very next day I got myself onto the very same map and the very same side when I was playing like my second game in the 60 TP. It's not like I was grinding the 60 TP, it was just voted for in the pole tanks. Some of my favorite things to do when I'm streaming is to play all of the vehicles that you all want me to see me play. So look, if it worked yesterday, I'm gonna do it again. We're gonna take Vents, Turbo, Gun Rammer. I know QuickyBaby not using vert stabs, QuickyBaby not using a durability device, but it's a tactical decision to take the turbo here because I know I want to cross the bridge. It's just the perfect situation for this vehicle. The turbo will allow me to cross before the Progetto 65 gets into position, and it's using that awesome field mod, top speed limit of 44 kilometers an hour that you can have on this vehicle. And if I can get across, now I'm sitting in the hold down position. Now hopefully we're going to be able to grind out our opponents in exactly the same way. And also, importantly, there are 2 artillery on the enemy team, and so by getting forwards, I don't have to worry about all of the sneaky artillery. So the M5Y bounces a heat round off me, I don't bounce a heat round off them, and I'm asking this Object 140 for help, hoping that the 140 would be able to isolate the M5Y for me. Now, you've got to be careful here against an M5Y because he actually has more damage per minute, although considering I'm using such good equipment, probably about the same damage per minute. But, buddy, when I'm dumping in rounds that hit for 750 and you're hitting me for 360, those are not good trades. And shout out to the Object 140 who actually manages to come around the corner. So I make a bit of a misplay here. The Object 140 actually manages to hit my tracks, which is a little bit of a misplay. I should probably turn my tracks inside, but I was worried that the 140 was going to try and harass the 140 on my team. That's something that I didn't want to let happen. So an EBR is going in behind the 140. I'm going to be firing heat rounds, as you can see at the start of this game, because for every game, like the previous one, where you're playing against tier 8s, and you don't need to spam the gold because you've got better overmatch angles and they've got weaker armor, in this kind of a scenario, every single bounce could possibly mean that the game is going to be lost. And when you're hitting for 750, you don't really mind spending 5,000 credits a shot. It's kind of when you're playing like the M5Y that we were just shooting at. That's where you don't want to be spending 5,000 credits for doing 360 to your opponents. So unfortunately, I've got myself stuck in a pretty awkward situation. The Object 140 on my team, instead of turning and engaging the 140 on the enemy team, has decided to plow towards the enemy base. Luckily, I get one into the side of the 140. The EBR and the Centurion are helping me in making the push play, and the whole glut of the enemy team are making their way to the west. I'm reloading AP now, so I'm going after the Centurion Action 10 with that. I'm not sure if I was firing. I think I was firing AP against the 140 there. So now we're going to push in, try and help our 140 against Jagdpanzer 100, who's on 2,200 hit points. Now, when somebody's on 2,200 hit points, that tells you A, they're not using a durability device, and B, they most likely don't have all the field mods, and C, they're most likely very fresh on that tank. Unfortunately, the BZ-75, the other meta heavy, comes round, finishes off the 140, the Object 261 on the enemy team hits the EBR, and I'm going to focus this Jagdpanzer 100 down, hoping that the EBR is going to help me, and unfortunately the BZ focuses the EBR, and I low roll, meaning I don't finish off the Jaegeru, and while we're dancing around the Jagdpanzer 100, my artillery finishes off the Jagdpanzer, but now I've got to worry about the Object 261, and I've got no med kit to my name. Now the BZ-75 versus the 60 TP. Looks like I'm doomed, right, boys and girls? 137 hit points. I'm stunned for 13 seconds. There's a meta heavy tank challenging the 60 TP for the, should we say, the crown of the meta vehicles here. I've got a Progetto 65 on my side. So what I've done is I've actually reversed into the corner as much as I can to get away from the heavies. The BZ75 flushes the shell. And now what I'm going to do is just try and keep myself in it. The Progetto bounces off 2 gold rounds. I avoid the artillery shell. The BZ tries to ram me, leaving me on 26 hit points. And that actually means that now I don't need nearly as high of a roll against them to be able to finish them off. Now I'm using the wreck of the BZ75 against the mediums, and the artillery's had enough of missing me, and it looks like it wants to come in for close quarters combat. Okay, buddy, I'll take that. And we're going to continue to avoid gold rounds from the Progetto 65, and oh my word, ladies and gents, if that was not an epic fight, I don't know what is. We went in against a full health Jaeger and a BZ75, and I can tell you that BZ75, they're a 56% win rate player. I'm licking my lips at the prospect of managing to claw my way back into this game. 7,000 damage in 5 minutes? What the flippity flop is going on? But we've still got work to do. There's a Griller right ahead. We put 1 into the back of the Griller. Now, cementing 8,000 damage. But I've still got to watch out. We don't know where this Progetto 65 is. And the Jaeger who's on 1,400 hit points, I'm just hoping that they're going to be able to help me out. And they do, because they're now distracting the Progetto 65, which is going to allow me to advance. I'm going to switch out to armor-piercing rounds here. The Progetto 65 is hopefully running out of ammunition against the Jagdpanzer 100, and I let the Jaeger know that I'm going to help him. Now, the artillery helps the Jaeger out, well, kind of, because the Progetto use a med kit. Maybe they're going to get their extra shell in, but they're probably not going to be able to roll high enough with 360 to be able to do 398 to the Jagdpanzer 100. And you can see that I'm thinking here in a 5 versus 1 scenario. Shall I do an intuition switch here for HE? Probably I can go through the side of the Progetto 65, right? This is greedy. I could do 1,000 damage with this next shot, which would be able to one-shot him, but unfortunately the shell whiffs. But luckily, the Progetto whiffs a shell at me. I get an extra 220 spotting, and I'm making a bit of a misplay here again. I don't need the armor-piercing rounds anymore. I'm hopefully going to do an intuition switch for HE. But, well, not for HE, but for AP. But still, we do 438 damage. And that shows you how good the HE, even if its nerf state, is against that kind of fairly mediocre armor. That even when we don't pen, we still do 2/3 of the damage that the shell would have done if it had gone with AP. But undoubtedly, the better shell to fire there would have been an AP. It would have overmatched pretty much the entirety of the Progetto 65. And instead of only getting an extra 400 damage out of that game, I would have most likely gotten like 1,000 if I just fired 2 AP shells. Nevertheless, this game was the definition of why the 60 TP is epic. Big gun, big alpha, armor that can just keep you in it with miracles, and enough speed so you're not some cumbersome heavy, like a super heavy E100, which can't manage to navigate the battlefield, that can't manage to make the flanking plays against the Jagdpanzer 100 that I did, and can't use its nimble nature to be able to position itself to avoid damage from those mediums while also fighting out against the B75. Clearly, this is why the 60 TP has become meta, why it is arguably now the best tier 10 heavy tech tree tank, and why hopefully after the years and years and years of QuickyBaby singing its praises, it's finally getting the attention it deserves. And I mean, you really couldn't script this. Same map, same tank, same side, same amount of damage within to the nearest 100. One day within like 23 hours after the battles. And both of these were decent profit games as we didn't spam gold, although that was with the Holiday Ops event. But even if we take that away, it's still a very nice profit, albeit with a premium account. 2 steel wall, 2 high calibers, the 60 TP just gets it done. The first ever tank that I did 10,000 damage in is still an absolute banger in 2024. And the only thing that worries me now is that with Wargaming's, should we say, legacy of nerfing vehicles like the Progetto, let's not make this thing too popular, all right, World of Tanks community? Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, hope you enjoyed this video today. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the 60 TP. Do you think it's an absolute epic banger of a tank, or do you think it's mediocre and you wouldn't bother with it? And after seeing this and hearing about it, are you going to give it a go? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.